Belle Goldie is a travel agent, but much more than that, she is a passionate advocate for the Australian travel industry and travel agents. Starting her career in travel in 2002, she worked with an established retail agency for 17 years before venturing out on her own in 2019. And well, we all know what happened in 2020. As much as many industries have moved on since the worst of the pandemic, the Australian travel industry in particular is still well and truly in the thick of it, and Belle is leading the charge to make some changes. Belle joins me today. Thank you so much, Belle, for taking the time to speak with me.
Hi, Adrian. Thank you so much for having me.
First of all, I want to start off on a bit of a lighter note and talk about the fact that I know you went overseas as soon as you could, as soon as the borders opened, to jump on a cruise. And can you tell me what that was like?
I did. So basically the borders opened on Monday and I flew out to the US on Wednesday. I literally couldn't wait. I was so excited that we'd heard on the Friday prior that the borders were potentially coming down, and ScoMo was going to make an announcement based on the restrictions of outbound passengers. And I literally, as soon as that came through, I think 11:01 in the morning, by 11:02, I'd booked my flights to the US. I just knew that I wanted to get out, and what better way of seeing the world than on a cruise?
100% couldn't agree with you more. What did you find the experience was like just traveling out of Australia at that time? Obviously, there were new restrictions that were in place that you had to comply with. How did you find navigating all of that? And did it affect your experience of the travel?
Yeah, so of course, the first thing I thought to myself was, oh my gosh, I've just booked a ticket. Now what do I need to do? And I guess that's where experienced agents come in to play here, that we know in the background what's going on and when it's going, what our fingers on the pulse. And I knew basically what paperwork I'd need. I knew that the restrictions required PCR testing on each way. But then I really started to look into in depth of the cruise that I wanted to do. And of course, you know, one of my favorite cruise lines is Norwegian Cruise Line. So I reached out to them. I've always wanted to get onto the Bliss and basically booked it. But then I needed to look through each port, of course, because it's not just about getting on the cruise in LA. It was about which ports is it going to visit? Am I allowed to freely get off the ship and experience the destination, or do I have to take a cruise line dedicated shore excursion? It was the case that I was actually able to get off and organise my own shore excursions, which was great. And at the time, there was no mask mandates on board. But I can tell you there's nothing more powerful than getting on board an aircraft for the first time and, you know, flying out of Sydney. And I can tell you, I was like a kid in a candy store getting on that plane, you know, putting my belt on, listening to I was actually watching the safety briefing. I know we all should do that. That's really important. But, you know, I was just blown away by the feeling of taking off for that first time again. But when I landed in LA, it was like Boxing Day sales. There was thousands of people everywhere in LA. And I was so shocked at the two comparisons between leaving Sydney and arriving in LA. It was two different worlds.
I don't even think we can comprehend what that's like, to consider that there would be thousands of people out and about when we still here and still to this day are living under this lockdown, as I feel like it sort of is for many of us at the moment. And I think the other thing as well is not taking these things for granted. You're getting on a plane and getting on a cruise. I mean, I did many cruises, and I think I will never take another one for granted ever again.
Yeah, I will never complain about lining up at the buffet ever again. You know, it was such a surreal feeling, and we almost missed the ship. I stayed in LA at the Magic Castle Hotel, which is one of my favorite hotels to stay in LA. But we'd called an Uber, and the front desk had said to us, make sure you allow enough time because it's a bit chaotic at that time of the day. So 11 o'clock came and we called an Uber, and I thought that was plenty of time. Last on board was 3:30. So I thought, 11, we're only 20 minutes from the port. Yeah, easy. But unfortunately, our first Uber got 2 minutes away and then cancelled on me. And then that happened 3 further times in a row. So I ran back up to reception because it was now, you know, close to 1 o'clock by this stage. Why do they keep on cancelling? And they're like, well, it's peak hour traffic. So they know if they go that far down to Long Beach, they're not going to get a ride back. So next Uber, I thought, let's get our thinking caps on. I sent him a text saying, if you don't cancel, I'm going to give you $100 tip. I need to get on this ship. get me there. He turned up, so he rocked up, all good. I saw him deviate off the plan. I thought, oh, maybe he knows a back way. He took us down to the commercial port. So here we get out of our, out of the Uber, and he's starting to take the suitcases out. And there's a big NCL sign. I'm thinking, okay, but this doesn't look right. It just doesn't feel right. I also had an agent who was already on board the ship, and she was messaging me. She's like, they're literally doing last call. They're asking where you guys are. They know there's supposed to be 3 Australians on board. Where are you? I pinged her where we were. She's like, you're at the wrong port. Oh my gosh. I'm like, how far away are we? And then the driver finally worked it out. He's like, we're at least like 20 minutes away. I'm like, last on board was in 10 minutes time. So we pulled up to the right port, the passenger port. The ship was there. We could see the ship, and it was ghost town. There was nobody there. And as we kind of pulled into the bag drop area, they were like, are you the Australians? We're like, yes. Oh, and I was so frightened they weren't going to let us on board because we had to be tested before we got on board. So they told us to go over to the testing area. So we knocked on the door, and this big burly guy came out with a, high vis vest on, and he's like, you're too late. I'm like, what do you mean? We've just flown from Sydney. There's no way we can't get on this ship. I have someone already on board the ship. We need to get on. He's like, no, and close the door. And I just stood there going, so I bang on the door again, bang, 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 bang. And this lady comes out in a, official looking NCO uniform, and she says, are you the Australians? She's like, okay, so I've just got to call up to the captain because he's going to make the final decision. We've closed off. All the testing facilities gone. We're going to have to get them back to specially test you two. I'm just like, please, we've come all the way from Australia. And she's like, okay. 5 minutes later, she walks back and she says, you're on, hurry up. They took our photos as we were literally running up the gangway. And as we got to the top, they were like clapping us. And they're like, you guys are going to be trouble. And we're like, yes.
Yes. Well, the Australians are notorious for something, but that's a new one.
So by the time we got on board, dumped our bags at our room and went up onto the top deck, it was like I wanted to lay on that top deck and just feel the wooden top deck. I was just so grateful to be there. And I just can't even describe to you the feeling of being out on the ocean again. I will never take that feeling for granted ever again.
I'm jealous, but I'm also stressed out about that story. So
get there early, people. Like, have a contingency plan. I will literally be there the 9 o'clock in the morning, lined up, ready to go for my next cruise.
Tell me a little bit about this. First of all, you had a rally scheduled for early January, which was postponed, no doubt because of the Omicron variant and everything that was raging about that. But since then, you've also started a Facebook group.
So ATAG. So that was really born because we recognized there really wasn't a, industry reach out group. I'm still in shock that in Australia we don't have any type of union. We have our great government bodies, and we also have the industry bodies. So we have CATO, we have CLEAR, we have AFTA, who are working tirelessly in the background for the last 2 years to help support travel and tourism in Australia. But as far as a grassroots movement meant, a lot of people had along the way the last 2 years had picked up that bat and ran with it. But they're all exhausted. They've been talking and lobbying their local members for 2 years. For me, when we cancelled the rallies, that was a really pivotal moment for me because I went, how can we touch thousands of agents across an industry? So it's like a spider web of industries within, travel. How can we reach out to them and really let them know that we haven't dropped the ball just because the rallies didn't go ahead? It actually drove us more to move towards something else. And what could we do in smaller numbers, still be respectful to the general public and be seen as responsible as far as health goes, because that was always our number one concern. And we wanted to make sure that we were being responsible. So Dan from Clean Cruising and I got our minds together, had a bit of a mad scientist call and went, let's start a Facebook group. It literally just was born a week ago. And within a week, we've got 1,400 members, which is crazy. When we first thought of the idea, I thought, maybe we'll get like 100. Wow. And the big names in travel coming forward too. Like you've got Meg Hill, you've got Dennis Bunnick, you've got, really fantastic people within our industry stepping up, going, okay, let's do this.
And I think it goes to show just how much of a gap there was in this segment, of support that was so needed. And this will all culminate, at least initially, this Tuesday coming on the 25th of January.
So the Day of Action is really about 25 key MPs who are really going to make that call and make that difference around the country. We've got Stuart Ayres, who's my local member. He's the Minister for Tourism. We're going to be at the Premier's office, the Prime Minister's office. We're going to be at Josh Frydenberg's in Melbourne. So there's been really great traction because a lot of MPs that I've spoken to really don't get how the travel industry are paid. We don't get paid until the client travels. And at the moment, like I was telling you today, I might touch a booking 5 or 6 times before they've even traveled. More. I mean, I have clients who've had one particular cruise cancel 7 times. So they're now on their 7th rebook. So a lot of us are feeling that across the board, and without the support, the financial support that we need, we're not going to be here in 3 to 6 months when travel really does kick back off. And all of these credits that are floating around till 2025, realistically, the people who are left in the industry are really experienced. They're typically, and no angst against men. This is not about that. It's about, women over 40 who have been in the industry 20, 30, 40 years. That's the demographic of people who are making up the industry at the moment. Almost the dinosaurs, we call us, that are left, that have these legacy skills that people who are in the industry just don't have that experience to be able to navigate the restrictions, the requirements, the testing that is needed at the moment. And that's why we're finding a lot of people walking into travel agents asking for help on those restrictions.
And I think you've raised a really good point in relation to the people that are doing this job now. And many agents have had to get other work. They've had to turn to other jobs, whether they were part-time or even full-time, whilst still maintaining their clients' bookings, and all the while not being remunerated for it in any way, shape or form. And in fact, dealing with significantly more work than they would have ordinarily. You've shared some information as well in the group about your personal issues with that as well. And I can only imagine that this endeavor is obviously one of the most personal things that you could be doing right now.
I've definitely felt the weight of the industry and the issues on my shoulders the last week, especially. I've got the most horrific of stories, and I'm collating those stories to give to my local member next week, not just my own, but other stories that I'm hearing. One of the things that the government brought out was the grant scheme. A lot of us think was just the criteria was too difficult. Myself, I didn't get any of the grants because I hadn't been open 12 months for the first grant for round 1. And then round 2, because I hadn't applied for round 1, I didn't qualify for round 2. Now, what we're asking from the government is to really make the support package and recovery package that AFTA are pushing at the moment, to be able to soften that criteria, to make it easier for businesses. Because let's face it, if a business like mine, and there's lots out there that opened just before COVID or during COVID even, if we're still here, we're either really passionate or really stupid. And I think we're a great mix of both. The people who are still here, still hanging on for that light at the end of the tunnel, have such passion and respect for this industry that we really want to be here post-COVID travel. Of course, that's where I went out and I've sold my car. Yes, it was a second car, but it was mine. And I shouldn't have to dig into my own pocket to keep my agency open, to keep my clients' money protected and their cruise credits there. We still need to be here in 6 months' time, and I want to be here in 6 months' time. Travel is so diverse. It just changes you, and I can't describe what it's like to get out in the world. And as you know, I traveled to Singapore in December. It was my 6th trip back to Singapore, but honestly, it was like seeing Singapore all over again, brand new for the first time. Again, travel just changes you, and it tells an amazing story, and I still want to make those stories with my clients.
Travel agents fill a very important role in culture, in society, and we will be potentially losing that because people just can't keep going on the way that things are now. So
no, I mean, some agencies, Adrian, that I'm talking to might survive 6 weeks, 8 weeks, others 2 to 3 months, others who've, sold investment properties or, remortgaged their homes. I mean, living off their super. Dennis Bunnick put up a great video on our group today. If you haven't watched it, get a box of tissues, because again, I've got people messaging me and calling me going, it was such an emotional piece. We can feel his pain and his desperation and his frustration. He wants to be here when Aussies return to travel unrestricted. And that's what we're really trying to hit home with the government. They think we're in a recovery phase. That's what they're calling it, which is just absolutely ludicrous. We're not in recovery at all. We're still in survival mode. A lot of us laugh because when I live in Western Sydney, of course, and when the lockdown happened for 3.5 months, I was able to access the $750 a week. So I was actually getting paid for the first time in a year, and then as soon as the lockdowns lifted, go back to your job and help Australians come back from overseas and, work on charters and repatriating people back for free, because the government has lost the connection with the travel industry. They really have forgotten how important we are. And if we're not here, there's going to be so many agencies that are literally going to dump their files on the MP's offices in 2 or 3 months' time and go, there you go, I'm financially, emotionally done. I can't go any further. And it's because of your non-support. Some of the responses that I've gotten from MPs personally, once we put up this page, I had people emailing me responses from their MPs and local electorates. One told a guy if he continued to ask for support and round 3 grant information, he was going to place him on the AFP watch list, likening travel agents to terrorists. And that's the level that we're at, that frustration level is so high. And that's why the group is doing so well, because they really are getting together on Tuesday. Some amazing support networks giving us resources to hand over to the MPs. And I guess it's going to be almost a day of awakening for the MPs.
I can't wait to see what the results is on Tuesday, and I certainly look forward to seeing what happens next, because I think that this is going to be the first step in seeing something finally happen and perhaps getting through to these MPs and these politicians, because as you said, they just don't get it and they just don't understand. So I very much look forward to it, and I am very grateful for your time today to talk about it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Adrian.
Thanks, Belle. Thank you so much for joining me.